At 7:12 a.m., I opened my garage expecting silence, coffee, and a normal Tuesday. Instead, I stared at three unfamiliar work trucks parked bumper to bumper inside my private garage, engines cold, doors locked, my tools pushed aside like junk. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was HOA entitlement crossing into something far worse, and I was standing in the middle of it, stunned, furious, and wide awake. Each truck carried HOA logos, ladders strapped on top, orange cones tossed carelessly against my wall. My car was trapped. My exit blocked. I checked my phone, half expecting a notice, a warning, anything. Nothing. No permission. No call. Just occupation. As I stood there, footsteps echoed behind me. Karen herself appeared, clipboard in hand, sunglasses already perched like armor, wearing the smile of someone who believed rules bent for her convenience. She announced they were temporarily using my garage while repainting curbs. Temporarily, she said, like that word erased trespassing. When I told her to move the trucks immediately, she laughed and claimed the HOA bylaws allowed access to shared structures. My garage, attached to my house, with my deed on file, was suddenly communal in her mind. She waved her clipboard like a badge and told me to calm down. Something clicked then. I realized this wasn't about paint or trucks. It was about power. Karen was used to pushing residents until they folded. She expected me to grumble, complain online, then give up. But standing there, blocked in my own home, something hardened. I told her she had 10 minutes to remove every truck. She rolled her eyes and walked away. I waited. Not pacing. Not yelling. Just watching the clock. When 10 minutes passed, nothing moved. No engines. No workers. Just my garage, hijacked. That's when I calmly walked to the side door and locked it. Then the back door. Then the internal access to the house. 3 trucks. 1 garage. 0 exits. Karen started shouting almost immediately, demanding I unlock everything. I told her I'd be happy to cooperate once law enforcement arrived. Then I stepped inside, picked up my phone, and called the sheriff, explaining that unauthorized vehicles were trespassing on my private property. As the call connected, I knew this day was about to explode far beyond parking. While waiting, I documented everything, snapping photos, recording timestamps, pulling my property survey and deed from my files. Years of quiet compliance had taught the HOA nothing except arrogance. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. Outside, voices rose, radios crackled, and neighbors gathered. Karen threatened fines, liens, and lawyers. I stayed silent, knowing facts carry more weight than shouting ever could. Especially when sheriffs, cameras, and paperwork are involved today legally. The shouting outside grew louder as I watched through the window, unseen. Karen paced the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at my locked garage like it had personally betrayed her. HOA workers stood around awkwardly, realizing they were suddenly trapped in a situation far above their pay grade. Neighbors began drifting over, curiosity pulling them closer like gravity. Nothing spreads faster than the promise of chaos. Karen banged on the garage door, demanding I unlock it immediately. She claimed emergency access rights, safety violations, and even accused me of holding property hostage. I calmly reminded her through the door that she had parked vehicles on private property without consent. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. She wasn't used to silence. She was used to obedience. Minutes later, the first mistake happened. One of the workers tried forcing the side door open. My security camera caught everything. I announced loudly that tampering with the lock structure would be added to the report. He froze instantly, hands up, backing away like a child caught stealing. Karen shot him a look that could curdle paint. While we waited for the sheriff, Karen switched tactics. She softened her voice, calling me unreasonable, suggesting we talk this out like adults. She offered to have the trucks moved soon, after they finished just one more section. I refused. The trucks stayed. The doors stayed locked. Boundaries, once crossed, don't reset with polite words. My phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from HOA board members flooded in, ranging from concern to threatening. Fines. Legal action. Emergency meetings. I saved everything. Screenshots are quiet witnesses. Outside, Karen's calm cracked again when a neighbor asked why the HOA was using my garage. She snapped, blaming me for overreacting and creating a scene. Ironically, she was the loudest one there. Then the sheriff arrived. Two cruisers rolled in slowly, lights off but unmistakable. Conversations died mid-sentence. Karen rushed forward immediately, launching into her version before the doors even opened. She talked fast, confident, authoritative, pointing at me like I was the problem. I waited my turn. When the deputy asked me to explain, I handed over my deed, the photos, timestamps, and camera footage. I explained simply, 3 trucks parked inside my private garage without permission. Locked for safety. Law enforcement called. That was it. No emotion. No insults. Just facts. The deputy nodded slowly, then turned to Karen. He asked a single question that changed everything: do you have written permission from the property owner? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her clipboard suddenly looked very small. Karen's face turned red as she fumbled for words. The deputy repeated, written permission. She stammered, twisting her papers, trying to find anything that justified her actions. There was nothing. Silence stretched across the driveway. Neighbors peeked from windows and lawns, witnessing the HOA powerhouse reduced to fumbling excuses. Embarrassment mixed with anger, a volatile combination. I stayed calm, arms crossed, phone in hand documenting every movement. Each second made Karen more frantic. The workers shifted nervously, realizing their participation could become a liability. The deputy glanced at me, then back at Karen, asking her to step aside. She tried to argue but was cut off politely but firmly. Authority was no longer in her hands. Meanwhile, I explained clearly, I called because 3 vehicles entered private property without consent. They are parked, blocking my car, and threatening damage. I locked the doors to prevent further risk. Every word was precise, factual. No emotion, no escalation. Just documented truth, visible evidence, and control of the narrative. Karen tried one last tactic: emotional manipulation. She gestured toward the trucks, claiming we were helping the community, repainting curbs, making improvements. The deputy listened, nodded, and simply asked if she had the owner's permission. She blinked, swallowed, and admitted she didn't. That one confession unraveled every justification she had prepared. I could see the subtle shift outside. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some laughing quietly, some shaking their heads. The HOA enforcer's confidence had crumbled. She tried to regain control by pointing at me and accusing me of overreacting. The deputy calmly said, "Sir has the right to protect his property. Without authorization, your claim holds no weight here." The workers began reluctantly backing away, engines off, no one daring to step inside the garage. Karen barked at them, but the moment had passed. She realized she was powerless. Meanwhile, I remained patient, letting the situation resolve with authority rather than rage. Waiting was always more effective than shouting. After a few tense minutes, the deputy instructed Karen to remove her trucks immediately. She called for backup from other HOA members, but no one appeared. She glanced at me, defeated, trying to salvage her dignity as she barked orders to her workers. It was a slow, humiliating retreat. I watched calmly as each truck slowly exited the garage, engines idling, but no one dared approach me. Karen followed, muttering threats under her breath about fines, letters, and legal action. I recorded everything. Every second, every word. Evidence, documentation, control. By the time the last truck left, Karen was red-faced, exhausted, and furious. The deputy had left with a polite warning, and my garage was finally mine again. It was over, for now. But lessons had been learned. Boundaries, once crossed, demand accountability. Once the trucks were gone, I stepped into my garage, surveying the minor mess left behind. Tools were shifted, cones scattered, and dirt tracked across the floor. It was nothing serious, easily cleaned, but the invasion stung more than the mess. Trespass is personal, the impact lasts longer than material damage. I took photos immediately, documenting every footprint, scuff, and displaced item. Each image became a time-stamped record of the intrusion, a shield against potential retaliation from the HOA. Knowledge is power, and evidence is control. While Karen may have believed she could act without consequences, I was quietly assembling an unshakable case. Outside, neighbors lingered, curious and sympathetic. Several approached, whispering about Karen's audacity and how unusual it was for someone to stand up so calmly. I nodded politely, returning smiles, knowing that patience and restraint often earn more respect than yelling ever could. Observation, documentation, and composure were my allies. As I cleaned, I thought about escalation. Karen would not forget this humiliation. Likely, she would attempt retaliation through letters, fines, or informal intimidation. But I had a strategy: law enforcement records, photographs, and clear communication lines. Every action she took without documentation strengthened my position, every impulsive move she made was her undoing. I walked around the property, checking the locks on all doors, verifying security cameras were recording. Each camera angle captured entry points and potential weak spots, ensuring no further surprise intrusions. Preventive measures were essential. Once trust is broken, vigilance becomes routine. Karen had pushed boundaries, now she would face consequences if she tried again. Later, I drafted a concise, professional email to the HOA board, summarizing the incident: 3 vehicles trespassed, unauthorized entry into private property, deputies called, and resolution achieved. I attached timestamps and photos. My tone was calm, factual, and unflinching. Facts are undeniable, emotions can be argued against. While sending the email, I reflected on Karen's psychology: entitlement, aggression, and a belief in absolute authority. She thrives on compliance and fear. When met with calm resistance backed by facts, her world unravels. Observation became my strategy: respond strategically, never impulsively, let evidence speak. By evening, the garage was spotless. Peace returned to the property. Yet, beneath the calm, a quiet awareness lingered: Karen would likely test limits again. But this time, she knew, every overstep has consequences, and law, evidence, and patience outweigh entitlement and yelling. As I locked the garage one final time that day, I realized the truth: in conflicts of power, the patient, prepared, and documented always win. Karen may rage, shout, and threaten, but rules, deeds, and authority exist for those willing to respect them and to defend their space. The next morning, I reviewed the security footage again. Every movement, every word, every hesitation was recorded. Karen pacing, shouting, gesturing wildly, it all told a story of overconfidence colliding with accountability. I watched her arrogance unravel frame by frame, each clip a lesson in the consequences of entitlement. Curiosity from neighbors persisted. Several stopped by, casually remarking how bold Karen had been. I listened politely, offering brief, measured responses. I avoided bragging, knowing that facts, subtly shared, carry more weight than anger or retaliation. Reputation matters, but restraint reinforces it. Observation, patience, and composure were my allies, not confrontation. Later that day, the HOA sent a formal email claiming miscommunication. Karen had apparently assumed permission for garage use. I read it calmly, highlighting inconsistencies and factual errors. I responded succinctly: trespassing occurred, vehicles were unauthorized, law enforcement was called, and resolution was achieved. Tone: professional, firm, and unflinching. Evidence outweighed emotion. While waiting for a reply, I inspected the garage for potential weaknesses. Small scratches, minor dents, nothing severe. Still, prevention is better than repair. I installed temporary reinforcements at the doors, checked locks, and ensured cameras were fully operational. Each precaution emphasized readiness without aggression. Security is psychological as well as physical. That afternoon, Karen arrived at the property line, face flushed, muttering about overreaction and legal threats. I remained inside, visible but calm, phone in hand documenting everything. Her presence was intimidation. My response, composed, factual, and silent. Every minute she lingered, she revealed more evidence of harassment without legal standing. The HOA board finally responded. They acknowledged the incident but attempted to downplay Karen's role. I countered with photo and video evidence, timestamps, and a clear summary of law enforcement involvement. Silence followed. Authority, when supported by facts, often stops arguments faster than yelling ever could. Neighbors whispered, some nodding in approval, some amused by the HOA's failure. It was a subtle victory. Karen had expected fear, conflict, or compromise. Instead, she received calm, documentation, and firm boundaries. Confidence paired with preparation is far more effective than anger in resolving disputes. By evening, I reflected on the pattern. Karen thrives on surprise and intimidation. Predictable, calm responses dismantle her influence. Observation, recording, and strategy are the tools that protect property, respect, and sanity. Patience is tactical, not passive. Before locking up the garage again, I reviewed every camera angle. Everything was visible, everything recorded. Karen may try future tricks, but her path had become transparent, monitored, and countered. Control shifted quietly but irreversibly. Power is not loud, it is deliberate, documented, and unwavering. The following week, I noticed subtle changes in Karen's behavior. She no longer approached my property directly, choosing instead to patrol from afar, muttering complaints into her phone. The intimidation tactic that once worked had failed. Observation and documentation had shifted the balance of power quietly but decisively. I continued reviewing security footage daily. Patterns emerged: Karen coordinating with HOA workers, planning minor visits, and checking garage access times. Each attempt at control was recorded, each overstep documented. Knowledge, I realized, is power. Awareness alone prevents escalation. I had become proactive rather than reactive. Neighbors occasionally waved, some mentioning previous complaints about Karen. Her reputation, once imposing, was quietly diminishing. I smiled, understanding that authority without evidence is temporary, fragile, and easily dismantled by facts. The more she tried to assert dominance, the more she exposed her misjudgment. Meanwhile, HOA communications escalated in tone. Formal letters, threatening fines, and implied legal action arrived. Each was addressed calmly, documented meticulously, and stored digitally. Facts neutralize fear. Documentation transforms perceived aggression into weakness. I knew patience would continue to win where emotion could not. One afternoon, Karen attempted a minor escalation, asking contractors to check the garage for safety reasons. I intercepted the request, politely stating all inspections required written permission from the property owner. Her face turned red, fumbling words while her plan dissolved before my composed response. Preparation breeds confidence, and confidence deters further attacks. I also upgraded security measures subtly: motion sensors, additional cameras, and reinforced locks. Each modification was practical, legal, and preventative. It was not aggression, it was control, visibility, and safety. Karen's threats would no longer surprise or intimidate. Power, when combined with strategy, prevents escalation before it begins. Neighbors noticed a shift in Karen's influence. Where she once commanded attention, now she muttered complaints to herself or the HOA board. Authority is conditional: when unchecked, it thrives. When exposed to evidence and calm resistance, it crumbles. Lessons had been learned the hard way, and her behavior reflected it. By the weekend, my garage and property were quiet again. I walked through the space, noting the cleanliness, order, and security. A small victory, yes, but an important one: boundaries respected, power balanced, and patience validated. It reinforced that calm, deliberate action is often more effective than confrontation. Karen may continue to test limits, but the tools are in place: observation, documentation, law, and composure. Each overstep is recorded, each tactic neutralized. The lesson is clear: authority without preparation is fleeting. Calm, calculated, and factual responses secure control and peace without unnecessary conflict. A few days later, I noticed Karen attempting another subtle maneuver. She lingered at the property line, clipboard in hand, taking notes as if inspecting my garage from a distance. Her posture was aggressive but cautious, revealing both confidence and hesitation. She had learned the hard way not to approach directly. I monitored her silently from inside, recording every movement on my security system. Every glance, every scribble, every muttered comment was evidence. The patience and preparation from prior incidents had shifted the balance. Karen could no longer act impulsively: every action was now visible, accountable, and strategically irrelevant to her. While watching, I reflected on the previous week's events. The HOA had escalated communications, but none of their threats had teeth. Legal notices, fines, or implied penalties hold no weight without factual backing. My calm, methodical documentation ensured every claim could be countered effectively. Preparation turned fear into leverage. Karen tried contacting contractors again, hinting at safety inspections and emergency checks. I responded professionally, requiring written authorization and proof of legal right to enter private property. Her frustration was visible: she attempted persuasion, intimidation, and manipulation, but the rules, facts, and security measures made each tactic ineffective. Authority had become procedural, and Karen's aggression powerless. Neighbors occasionally peeked through fences, whispering about Karen's failed attempts and her increasingly visible embarrassment. Some offered casual support, others silent approval. The social dynamics of the neighborhood had subtly shifted. Confidence, respect, and vigilance matter just as much as legal authority when boundaries are enforced consistently. One evening, I conducted a full inspection of the garage. Everything was intact, clean, and secure. Minor disturbances from previous intrusions had been repaired. Cameras, sensors, and locks were functioning perfectly. The physical space reflected a larger truth: readiness neutralizes threats. Calm, careful preparation conveys control more effectively than confrontation ever could. Later, I compiled all documented evidence into an organized digital file. Photos, timestamps, emails, and video footage created an airtight record of trespassing, threats, and harassment. Each entry strengthened my position, ensuring that any future escalation would be met with irrefutable proof. Knowledge is control, documentation is power. Karen, meanwhile, seemed to oscillate between frustration and resignation. She lingered less visibly, muttering complaints into her phone, visibly aware that every attempt would be recorded. Authority without strategy is fleeting, persistence without evidence is ineffective. By nightfall, the neighborhood returned to quiet. My garage remained secure, my boundaries respected, and my calm reaffirmed. The lesson was clear: confrontation without preparation may fail, but vigilance, documentation, and composure ensure that even the most aggressive entitlement meets its match. Weeks passed, and Karen's attempts dwindled. She no longer approached the garage directly, instead resorting to phone calls and emails filled with thinly veiled threats. Every message was met with calm, factual responses, including timestamps, photos, and records of prior interactions. Patience had transformed her aggression into procedural irritation. I maintained daily surveillance, reviewing camera footage and checking locks. Any minor anomaly was recorded immediately, ensuring readiness for any future attempts. The constant awareness had shifted control entirely to me. Karen could plot and plan, but her influence was neutralized. Every action she considered was now visible, accountable, and legally documented. The HOA board eventually intervened, attempting mediation. I provided my compiled evidence, explaining the trespassing incidents, the vehicles, and the confrontation with deputies. The board, confronted with undeniable facts, offered no immediate threats or retaliation. Their authority, once used to intimidate, now had limits. Facts carried weight, entitlement did not. Neighbors noticed the change as well. Karen no longer commanded attention. Her attempts at intimidation were replaced by muted grumbling and whispered complaints. The social landscape had shifted. Respect for property, documentation, and composure outweighed her loud authority. Observers learned silently that compliance is conditional, and violations carry consequences. I also reinforced internal boundaries. Rules for visitors, contractors, and HOA personnel were clarified in writing and communicated professionally. Security measures were upgraded subtly. Additional cameras, motion detection, and reinforced locks ensured that surprise attempts would be immediately documented. Preparation prevents escalation before it begins. During one late afternoon, I observed Karen pacing at the edge of the property, frustrated and powerless. She glanced at the cameras, realizing her every move was recorded. Her aura of confidence had collapsed. Authority without accountability is ephemeral, and hers had been dismantled quietly but irreversibly. I spent time reflecting on the lessons from the ordeal. Boundaries require vigilance, patience, and documentation. Aggression alone cannot override rights. Calm observation, strategic action, and preparation neutralize entitlement. Authority, when unbalanced, can be countered with clarity, facts, and quiet resilience. By sunset, the garage was secure, quiet, and orderly. The vehicles that had once trapped me were long gone. Karen had retreated, temporarily defeated, and the HOA had been reminded that overreach carries consequences. Patience, preparation, and composure had won the day without unnecessary conflict. The final lesson crystallized: those who attempt to impose power without justification will ultimately be checked by facts and boundaries. The key is calm observation, strategic documentation, and unwavering enforcement of one's own space. The struggle was over, for now, but the principles would remain forever. Months later, the garage remained untouched. Karen had stopped attempting direct access, resorting to distant calls and petty emails that I logged meticulously. Her authority had been quietly dismantled, replaced by procedural caution. Every action she considered was now constrained by accountability, surveillance, and law. I reviewed my records one final time: photos, video, timestamps, emails, and security logs. Each entry told the story of trespassing, confrontation, and resolution. The narrative was clear, airtight, and undeniable. Evidence had replaced emotion, preparation had replaced panic, and boundaries had replaced fear. Every overstep had been neutralized. Neighbors occasionally mentioned Karen's failed attempts. Her reputation for intimidation had eroded quietly. Authority that relies solely on entitlement cannot withstand calm, factual resistance. The lesson spread indirectly: compliance is conditional, aggression has consequences, and patience carries far more weight than shouting. Observers learned silently without confrontation. I reflected on my own growth through the ordeal. Patience, strategy, and documentation had transformed what could have been a heated, destructive conflict into a controlled resolution. Calm observation, decisive action, and reliance on facts proved more powerful than anger or retaliation ever could. The HOA, finally constrained by clear evidence, began following proper procedures. Any requests now went through formal channels, documented and verified. Karen's impulsive tactics were neutralized, and the board had learned that overreach meets resistance when rules, rights, and law intersect. I also reinforced my own internal policies: clear communication, documentation, and property security. Future conflicts would be met with the same calm, prepared strategy. Boundaries, once respected, reduce stress and prevent escalation. Preparation ensures control, and control ensures peace. By the end of the week, my garage was not only secure but symbolic, a testament to patience, planning, and enforcement of personal space. Every lock, camera, and timestamp represented a victory of reason over entitlement, evidence over ego. Karen, now distant and cautious, had learned that her tactics could no longer succeed unchecked. Authority without justification crumbles. Aggression without evidence fails. Observation, documentation, and calm action endure. Lessons were internalized quietly, but the message was unmistakable. As I closed the garage one last time that week, I felt a sense of finality. The trucks were gone, the boundaries restored, and the lesson delivered. Power, when wielded with preparation, patience, and precision, cannot be taken away by entitlement or aggression. Peace had been earned through vigilance, strategy, and composure.